Once again, welcome back to Herd Immunity News. I'm Marcus Botzer. It gives me great pleasure to welcome on Mr. Ben Habib to the platform. Ben is the leader of the political party Advance UK. He's a former member of the European Parliament. He's also a businessman. He's one of our favourite guests because he's also brutally honest about the state of this country, what needs to be changed, and he goes deeper on an intellectual level, I think, into the ways and solutions that we can actually change this country for the betterment. Let me just say, Ben, how are you today, sir?
Very well, thank you, Marcus. Good to see you, and thank you for having me on and for those very kind introductory words.
My pleasure, and it's a great time to have you on because as we speak right now, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer and his legal team will be furiously writing a speech to the House of Commons that explains away the fact that the Prime Minister is claiming that he was not in possession of the security clearance details by the UK security vetting system. Instead, he deferred that decision to the now departed Ollie Robbins, who was part of who was the head of the Foreign Office, in effect, over Yvette Cooper. But that clearing alone, Ben, was enough for Prime Minister Starmer to claim that Mandelson had met all the security details. What do you think, firstly, about Keir Starmer? Do you think he actually knew that Peter Mandelson had failed vetting?
It's almost academic whether he knew Peter Mandelson had failed vetting. Every single politically engaged individual in the United Kingdom and abroad knows that Peter Mandelson is a rotten individual. He had to resign as Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. He had to resign as Secretary of State for Trade and Industry, as it was then, under Tony Blair. And then he was, everyone knew about his relationship with Epstein. Of course, more details have emerged, but it's been known for a long time that he was friends with Epstein. So why you would appoint someone to the most important diplomatic position available, ambassador to the United States of America, with such a checkered past is beyond me. But we mustn't forget that Mandelson was also given that cushy job to the Commission. He was the British representative on the European Union Commission after he was ignominiously exited the front benches, and then he was ennobled. So Mandelson, until now, has had the benefit of that Teflon that goes with people who are deeply dodgy. And Starmer should never have put him forward for the job. We all knew it. We all knew it at the time. When I looked at Mandelson being put forward, I thought, I can't believe this snake's being, put forward for this incredibly important, sensitive position. And then, of course, since the Epstein Files have become clear and the kind of money that Mandelson, a pittance, by the way, they'll sell their country down the drain. The small sums of money that he was getting from Epstein in order to give him the heads up on when the European Union was going to be printing more cash and so on during the credit crunch. When that came to light, Starmer first said, and then obviously he was removed as ambassador, or he resigned. And then Starmer first said that, he'd been through vetting, he passed all his vetting, that it was Mandelson who had lied to him, that had he known the truth about Mandelson, he wouldn't have appointed him. But even before this vetting scandal emerged a few days ago, we knew that actually Starmer wasn't telling the truth back in September 2025, because it came to light that senior members of the Cabinet Office, advisors like Jonathan Powell, who are extremely seasoned politicians, we may not like them, but very seasoned people, had said to Starmer when he was appointing Mandelson that if you go ahead with this appointment, you do it at serious personal reputational risk. That's on file. And so Starmer was warned. He knew, the vetting, that's the latest episode in this horrible scandal. But all the way along, Starmer has known Mandelson's bad. Before he appointed him, at the time he was appointing him, and a number of times, obviously, since, assuming he's telling the truth, it's been revealed to him that others knew that Mandelson was, a poisonous individual who shouldn't hold this position, was not fit for office. So Starmer, however which way he may want to go about blaming other people, he has to take he has to take the rap for this one.
Oh, absolutely. And, you bring up great points, which at the direction of the Department of Justice under the Trump administration, all this really has come to bear. And it's been picked up actually by, you could argue, a pro-Angela Rayner, pro-Andy Burnham Guardian and independent newspaper have front and centred the emails which back up what you've said, that this has been known since around 2009, is when Mandelson's relationship. So we're talking about Mandelson and Epstein's relationship has been known since then. And it was around that time, of course, that he leaked incredibly sensitive information about the economy, as you said, about the announcements of sales of property and sales of businesses. And the emails suggest that he was given the heads up the night before. The bailouts, for example, the 500 billion. I mean, that's not small beer.
No, and Epstein would have profited from that, knowing that was the European Union, I think, printing money, wasn't it?
Yes.
Knowing that the EU was about to print money, he would have known the euro was about to weaken. He would have been able to take positions in the euro and made potentially hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars worth of profit. And what did he pay Mandelson? 75 grand or something in total? It shows you that these people... for a pittance, they'll just sell their country down the drain. It's unbelievable. And I hope we never see Mandelson again. I suspect we won't, thank goodness.
Well, all of this dog and pony show over the Mandelson, Starmer, you're right to mention Jonathan Powell, because he goes back to the Blairism. He goes back.
He does, yeah.
He's one of the architects as well. And the young team that are like the Ollie Robbins, former Goldman Sachs. Where have we heard that company name before? Richie Sunak. The former Goldman Sachs globalist ideology is root and branch throughout Whitehall. But if I can take you on to what former Prime Minister, Conservative Prime Minister, albeit for a cup of coffee,
42 days.
Yeah, 44 days, whatever she had.
44 days, yeah.
44. I'll be fair, Ben. Come on, give her a due.
Well, 42 would have been a better number. At least it's divisible by 7.
Well, you make a great point. You make a great point.
It would have been a round number of weeks, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. But, we'll talk about her briefly at the end of the interview, if you don't mind. But she's now a whistleblower on how the UK actually operates. Now, you've been talking about this for a long time, but she's saying that there is no obligation for someone like Ollie Robbins, who effectively runs the Foreign Office, no obligation for him whatsoever to brief the Prime Minister or any other minister on events of state. I mean, surely to God, this does cry out now for the rest of the public to get on board with the fact that if you're running a political party, you have to ask for a complete termination of all Blair's policies.
Yeah, and all Blair's appointments.
Laws.
Yeah, laws and appointments. I've made the case for a long time, and I'm not alone in making it, but what Blair perpetrated when he became Prime Minister was nothing short of a constitutional revolution, a revolution that denuded this country of 1,000 years of incremental evolution into what was actually a really good constitutional, albeit unwritten, constitutional setup. And Blair rewrote it in a matter of 2 or 3 years. And the damage that he's done to this country through the so-called reforms that he put in place in 97, 98 and subsequent years has been absolutely dramatic and disastrous. We're seeing it all now manifesting itself in full swing. We're seeing the full effects of it now. But the groundwork for all the damage we're experiencing was put in place by Blair, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like Nigel Farage in the Reform Party, Rupert Lowe, Kemi Badenoch, they're being called out by Liz Truss because they're not actually aiming their sights a little bit higher in her view, other than that from the ECHR. I mean, you're talking about the Constitutional Reform Act in 2005, for example, which drives a coach and horses through any semblance of British national sovereignty, Ben. And I know you've been fantastic on Northern Ireland and their excommunication from this country, that the leaders of the day of the right apart from yourself perhaps, aren't talking about this loud enough. What are your thoughts on what Ms. Truss was saying?
Well, I think she's right. And I think that one of the problems with our politics is, and it didn't used to be this way, but it's become populist right across the board. And I don't mean that's bad, but populism's great because you're appealing to the popular support. But it can't just be populism. Behind the populism, there has to be some serious thinking going on about the policies that are required to be enacted in order to deliver security and prosperity for the country. And people like Farage and others go as far as the sound bites, and they're not really looking at what's going on behind the scenes. I mean, just to give you an example, when we at Advance UK went about the beginning of our policy making, we realized very quickly that even though immigration was the single most important thing in the minds of the electorate, actually there was one more important thing than immigration. And it's something that all politicians disregard at their peril and at the country's peril. And that is the cultural settlement of the country. And what's happened through the passing of all those Blair laws is that the culture of the country has been ripped apart. And culture is critical. Culture is both upstream and downstream of legislation. If you change the laws, the way people behave changes, and the way people behave then crafts more laws. And he got a vicious circle going between the Human Rights Act, the Climate Change Act, the Constitutional Reform Act, the terrorist, I can't remember the full names of these acts, but he introduced an act of on the right for certain parts of the constabulary to be
devolution.
There's a devolution, the creation of the Supreme Court, the independence even of the Bank of England. All of these things, all the quangos, the taking the knee to international laws, all of this was just ripping our country apart and set in train a new way of thinking, a new cultural settlement for the UK, one which was based on mass immigration, multiculturalism, diversity, equity and inclusion, progressive discrimination, failing to be able to identify what it means to be British any longer. All of this goes back to culture. And so the first policy that we announced at Advance UK was on culture, so that we could settle the country. And culture actually defines who you are as a people. It's not just, obviously it is, but it's not just art, music, food, books, history, language. It's all of that coming together and giving us the tools with which we can identify commonality between everyone in the country, so we feel like a family. So we pull together for the family. Does that make sense? And so, I don't see any of the political parties doing that. If you read our culture policy, you'll see we have a grand reset of what it means to be British, getting us back to the pre-Blair years.
And it boils down to being in a position to govern, because as what Dominic Cummings has said, regardless of what you think of Dominic Cummings, he is now a whistleblower at the highest echelons, and he will explain to you that none of the policies that you want to enact, Ben, will come to pass because they'll have to go through the Cabinet Office. They'll have to go through the Cabinet Office legal team. They'll have to go through the Supreme Court. They will be on the advice of the Attorney General, someone like Lord Harmer, who's been synonymous with representing terrorist groups. And obviously he's in the gift of those groups if he's representing them, to get them off the hook. I mean, we've got a review coming up by the review of this whole situation of the Starmer Gate is going to be done by Adrian Fullard. Now, Adrian Fullard will be in the press, not to take you off on a tangent, but these things are connected. Adrian Fullard has just come out because he was the chair of the Southport inquiry. Now, Adrian Fuller's past is that he worked for a group called Liberty. And Liberty were represented as legally until 1990 by none other than Sir Keir Starmer.
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah.
So do you think this man is going to give a fair and just, go off Keir Starmer?
Yeah, no, he's not. I mean, it's all it'll be the establishment coming together to somehow try and bail the Prime Minister out.
Ben, sorry to interrupt, but you're Prime Minister, right? Ben Habib is now Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. How do you address this Whitehall cesspit full of panjandrums, all on foreign money and all corrupt? Where do you start?
The first is well before we get to 2028, we're going to have a comprehensive set of policies. And once we've got that comprehensive set of policies, we are going to be drafting legislation. It's actually mostly quite simple to do because we're going to be, our principal focus is going to be repealing, ditching regulations, ditching laws that have been made over the last 30 years. And when we stand in the general election in 2029, I don't think it's going to come much sooner than that. We never know. We will not just have a manifesto which gives you some kind of airy-fairy understanding of the direction of travel. Yeah. We'll have a manifesto backed up by and which includes draft legislation, so that the British electorate, when they vote for us, are actually voting for specific legislation that we will be empowered to enact. And the reason that's so important is that as a manifesto pledge, the Lords, the civil service, no one can stand in the way of that draft legislation under the Salisbury Convention. It has to go through Parliament and be enacted. The other great benefit is that we can enact it all on day one. So I'm really following the Trump playbook, which is go into Parliament on day one with the fundamental changes that are required to be made at day one, so that you can then use the next 5 years to make sure that they're properly implemented. So we get our legislative architecture done virtually instantly without any ability for the civil service and the Lords to obstruct us. That's the first step. Part of that will be a civil service reform bill, which gives us, simply what you need is the ability to sack people. And then you have to have the confidence to keep sacking them until performance improves. We can't have any more Sir Humphreys running the government. We need... all of that was kind of fine, I think, Marcus. Yeah. When the country was run in accordance, when everyone observed the protocols, the unwritten constitution, people weren't, of course, ministers are sometimes dodgy, they're not infallible, members of the civil service can have bad intent and so on. But overall, our government and our ministers and the civil service, they all kind of worked reasonably well until Blair. And we've got to get back to a position, and we've got to prevent anyone from, we've got to get back to the pre-Blair time, and we've got to prevent anyone from interfering in that. And so we've got to do away with the possibility of the civil service acting like it used to under Sir Humphrey, etc. There can be no room for that. We need a 180-degree change in direction.
Yes, absolutely. I hope you've got a good legal team behind you, because in all seriousness, I'm saying that because not only are you going to have to try and effect those changes, you're going to have all the dirty tricks under the sun thrown at you, as we've seen happen in this country, where allegations can be made, business improprieties can be brought up, or created, or basically invented by private security companies that work for departments, and they're disconnected from accountability because they're on a very murky, they have a very murky relationship. And this has been going on since Harold Wilson's days.
I'm sure. Yeah.
So obviously you're not oblivious to any of this.
I'm already experiencing the establishment trying to shut us down. A number of things have happened. For example, being taken off air the minute I launched Advance UK. We sometimes find that our social media is being hampered. We can't get our messages out. And that won't be the owners of the social media companies. I think that is our establishment getting involved in preventing the transmission of our posts and so on. So we're already on the receiving end of it. And I think there have been some, I'm not going to name them, but there have been sort of strategic moves made by various political parties designed to take us out. One of the problems I think people have with Advance UK, the establishment has with Advance UK, is that we can't be controlled. I have, whether or not they can trump charges up against me, they might try that. But I've spent my entire working life in the public domain, working for a listed company. So everything I've done has been subject to public company scrutiny. My company is registered with the FCA, it's AIFMD approved, it's listed on the London Stock Exchange, etc. So I've been scrutinized throughout my career. Every penny I've made has been made through that mechanism. So there's no private dealings that haven't gone through public scrutiny. So they're going to be really challenged. They're going to have to trump up stuff. And because I'm reasonably wealthy, Marcus, I don't really give a damn what they say. I don't care. I'm not going to be bought. I'm not going to be promised an ennoblement and therefore take the knee to the establishment. I just don't care. So I'm in it for the fight to restore our country, to get our country, secure and prosperous again. And that's why I think we become a problem for all the other political parties, all of which, without exception, the ones that I've been mentioning, all of them are infected by the establishment.
Yeah, I mean, Liz Truss is tearing into Robert Jenrick because she said, look, Jenrick is now railing against the policies that he fought for so long. And I think people have to be very wary and look at the track record of people like Nadeem Zahawi. I mean, I got a lot of abuse, Ben, when I went tonto on the appointment of this man. And I think myself and others that I'm part of no political organisation or party, but I have respect for a lot of people who are political leaders. You're one of them. And I think doing what I do, alternative journalism, asking questions for the betterment of the country, I think it's not bad that people like me aren't part of any group motivated by power or influence in any way. No. But Jenrick's been torn apart because of his track record, as is Nadeem Zahawi for his COVID litany of crimes, wanting to inject children and adults that were absolutely at no risk whatsoever. So now Reform have to try to decouple themselves from Zahawi. I mean, and he hasn't become Foreign Secretary. Why do you think that is? Why do you think Zahawi hasn't got his deal?
Well, I think the backlash after Reform took him on was enormous. Of course, the direction of travel of Reform wishing to become part of the establishment was set very early on when Farage returned. Farage has never wanted to make any dramatic change. All he's really wanted is for the establishment to accept him. And when it didn't accept him to start with, then he became a Brexiteer and he banged that drum and he made noise, etc. But he just wants to be in the Tory party. And so he's recreated the Tory party within himself. The first person that he took on, I think, the first defection was Andrea Jenkins, who was a Boris fan. At least she was a Brexiteer, but she was a Boris fan. The next one he took on was Jake Berry. Now, Jake Berry was someone who was pro lockdowns. He was pro the jab. Yeah. He's pro net zero. That was right at the beginning. Then Nadine Dorries, another Boris fan.
Oh my God.
And of course, Nadeem Zahawi, I think, was almost like the final sort of cherry on the cake, because this is a guy, you mentioned his COVID stuff, but he was making speeches in the Oxford Union saying that there should be an amnesty for people who've entered this country illegally and that they should be allowed to stay. And he's joined Reform. Jenrick would defend himself and say, I've learned the error of my...
He resigned.
Yeah, I resigned and I've learned the error of my ways and so on. But he is a guy who voted Remain. He stayed in the Tory party throughout the Sunak years, pretty much. He only resigned, I think, when it looked pretty clear that the electorate had gone completely against Sunak and the Tory party, and he was kind of getting ready for something else. And so, I mean, I think they're all kind of tainted.
Yeah, it's very difficult to uncouple yourself if you're a political party. And for example, say if you took on Boris, you would probably lose a lot of credibility, but you would get a lot of votes. There'd be a lot of political capital out of this. I could think of better examples. Say Jacob Rees-Mogg. Yeah. If you took on someone like Jacob Rees-Mogg, or even Liz Truss, if she was to pick up the phone, you are taking the good and the bad with these people. You're taking their track record. Everybody can get it wrong and put their hands up and do a mea culpa. But I think for people like Zahawi, they're just far too toxic to wash.
Too toxic. I mean, at least when Jacob Rees-Mogg speaks, he speaks our language. And I think he loves this country. And I think Liz Truss loves this country. I think Suella Braverman loves this country. But,
Sure.
she was, however, Home Secretary when we had the Boris wave. And you've got to ask yourself, and now she's joined Reform, a party that's got Zahawi in it. The question is, has Suella really learnt from the mistakes of the Tory government and her own mistakes as Home Secretary? Otherwise, if she'd learnt those lessons, she wouldn't join Reform. And I've been a great fan of Suella's, but then to watch her sort of inauguration, that press conference at which she was revealed by Farage having joined Reform, she had her head on his shoulder. Do you remember that? And I just thought, I thought, Suella, what are you doing? What are you doing? She's a great speaker, but why would you do that?
Well, that's not really the best looking at it. And if you want to be taken seriously, I would say keep your hands off. Don't do what Starmer does and manhandle Zelensky. Basically, it's public groping now that we're seeing that these people have their hands all over each other, and it maybe lead us down an alleyway or a passageway into some rabbit hole.
Interesting choice of words.
Keir Starmer, and we're not making any aspersions, but there is a story going out there right now that's in the public domain about Keir Starmer and 4 to 5 Ukrainian models. How did they know where Starmer lived? How did they know where his former cars were parked? I mean, just briefly, Ben, what is your take on how Starmer will deal with these accusations about his links with Ukrainian, very good-looking young men?
Well, this is a new one on me. I haven't heard this.
Oh, you've not been briefed.
I haven't been briefed on this rumor. So these are 5 good-looking young Ukrainian men that have been associated with Starmer.
Well, they attacked his houses. They viciously.
Yes. I remember this. Sorry, I remember this.
Yeah,
2 months
sorry,
ago,
I should have made it clear. Yeah, this isn't 5 new ones.
Sorry, I thought this was a romantic liaison about which he was being accused.
We don't.
But you
know.
think this could be the tail end of a romantic liaison that went wrong?
One can only assume that the Prime Minister.
Yeah, what axe have they got to grind? Exactly. Why are they upset with him? Why would they attack his house? Look, they're all dodgy, aren't they, Marcus? Why would Lord Ali be getting keys to number 11 and holding his parties there and simultaneously buying dresses, sunglasses, and God knows what else
Suits
for the Prime Minister and his wife? It's just all sick. It's disgusting.
Yeah. I mean, I want to know why Lord Ali number 1 would give Keir Starmer access to his Covent Garden apartment. And the explanation for that was my son was studying for exams, but exams that had already been sat.
Yeah, I'd forgotten that story. Thank you for reminding me. And I think the benefit in kind was like 40 or 50 grand, wasn't it? Which was not declared. It wasn't declared in the parliamentary register.
That's correct. and of course, Lord Ali worked at Carlton Television, where he came across, if you excuse the expression, Peter Mandelson. And Peter Mandelson and Lord Ali were very close while at Carlton Television, because Peter Mandelson made his money in television, in media. And then he was plucked out, use my language very carefully, by Neil Kinnock, to come under his wing to help them win. In the 1992 election, obviously that fell flat on their face. But there's a lot to be discussed about these people.
There's a lot. And the other connection, I mean, since we're talking about connections, Osborne and Mandelson were great mates. So how does it work with, a senior member of the Labour Party being good friends with a senior member of the Conservative Party? And they were both on the boat with Deripaska, the Russian oligarch, who is now, I think, persona non grata. They both love China. They're both banging the drum for China. So what money are they taking from China, these people? They've taken money from other sources. We know that now. We know that clearly about Mandelson. So how rotten is all of this? And I think they're all kind of in bed with each other.
We're talking about national security. How can Keir Starmer and his government ever be trusted again? Or historically, with any decisions that he has made as Prime Minister, just to take it back to him for a second,
Yeah.
Any of those decisions, including the go-ahead for the Chagos deal that was given the green light, obviously it's gone through the same checks and balances that we now know are completely bogus and
Yeah.
flawed. Same with the Chinese embassy that's being built in London. This has been
Yeah.
given a security clearance by the Foreign Office and Ollie Robbins as well. So how can those decisions now, when we
Yeah.
see retrospectively that there are no rules, Ben, how can
There's
they
certainly
be
no
allowed
rules
to stand?
protecting the British people. And you didn't mention Gibraltar. Gibraltar, we just given away to the European Union. 2.3 square miles of Europe.
Spanish control the border.
Yeah, the Spanish control the border. Without Gibraltar, we wouldn't have won the Napoleonic Wars. Without Gibraltar, we wouldn't have won World War I or World War II. It's a critical port, and we've just handed it over. It's absolutely it's soul destroying, and I'm sure you're aware that awful man Hermer is now proposing the Troubles Bill. Have you been following this? So there's a new Act of Parliament going through, which is the opposite of the Legacy Act that the Tories brought in. But this will allow people like Jerry Adams to take action against British security services. It will allow the government to pursue former servicemen accused of wrongdoing in Northern Ireland. All those blooming terrorists of the IRA were given a letter and immunity, released from jail, treated like bloody heroes, and our veterans are now going to be attacked. This is our government standing against the British people.
And this, you're talking about the Good Friday Agreement, of course, which you've been all over. How it's just a witch hunt for British patriots that were doing the job, protecting our realm, protecting our country. But we are acting like a defeated nation. They talk about Vladimir Putin being the biggest threat to this country, and obviously we've got to take that seriously. But how can you take it seriously when just a couple of weeks ago, Ben, they, after saying that any Russian vessels would be boarded, would be sent packing, we sent out a Royal Fleet auxiliary ship that's carrying cornflakes packets and pedigree jump out to follow this Russian convoy that just, I mean, they're a laughing stock. There is no defence of this realm now, surely.
Yeah, and I think one of them was reconnaissance, two were attack. You know, they could have done damage, and they were in our waters for months. And our only response was, we see you. It's like, what? So what? What did you do about it? You know.
Look, well, that brings me on just to the second and final part. This has been fantastic, getting all the information that you've got from you in Advance UK, from your point of view. But also, if we can just bring you on to Iran and what President Trump is doing, but also the complete reluctance for the NATO coalition of the witless, or the shilling, as some people call them, this coalition of the willing, complete reluctance to help and support our number one ally in America when they're trying to rid the world of an Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps that knowingly and admittedly, even by these guys, have been developing a nuclear weapon and have killed maybe up to 45,000 of their own people who have been protesting against the tyranny.
And now it would appear that all these attacks that have been taking place in the United Kingdom against Jews is being perpetrated. The suspicions arose today. I don't know if you saw that.
Yes.
That it's the Iranian regime is behind it. And of course, in the various actions that our government's taken, it's become open day on Jews in the United Kingdom. That's where we've headed down. But just on the Iran conflict has absolutely gobsmacked me. I totally understand any politician being circumspect about military intervention in the Middle East. We've made some really bad decisions. Spending 22 years in Afghanistan was a really bad decision. Attacking Iraq was a really bad decision. Saddam, for all his awfulness, actually kept a lid on a very, very troubled, difficult country and acted as a bulwark, actually, against Iran. Taking him out was not clever. And then the Arab Spring was ill-conceived, promoting the destruction of Libya. Libya is a failed state now. Syria, a failed state now. We've got a former Al-Qaeda member in charge of Syria. We've done huge damage in the Middle East, but that should not color our judgment when we look at Iran. Iran has been a malevolent force in the Middle East ever since 1979 when Khomeini took it over. They finance Hamas, they finance the Houthis, they finance Hezbollah. They've been critical in preventing Iraq from reaching peace, financing the Shias in Iraq to stay in opposition to the Sunnis and so on, financing a proxy war even in as far away as Libya. And of course, they're trying to get a nuclear warhead. They have planned terrorist attacks on our own soil. They've carried out terrorist attacks on our own soil. It now looks like they're attacking our Jewish community. Iran, taking Iran down, degrading Iran, degrading its regime, was absolutely in our national interest. Forget about the special relationship with the US.
Yeah.
It was in our national interest. They then attacked our base in Cyprus. They sent 2 intermediate-range intercontinental ballistic missiles to bomb Diego Garcia.
Yeah.
One fell in the sea, the other was taken out by the US. We were directly attacked by Iran, and still we stood by. And the other thing, I just want to get this off my chest, the press, the commentariat, even our own politicians right across the board, including leaders of Restore Britain, Reform, and Kemi, have all denounced Trump's action in Iran. They've all come out against it. And they regard Iran almost as they regard the battle almost as if it's 2 equals, the US versus Iran, and actually Trump's the bad guy here.
Yeah.
Iran is a terrorist state. It's now practicing what the commentariat called asymmetric warfare. In other words, attacking countries that are completely innocent and not part of the war in the first place. That's what a terrorist state does. And we should be denouncing Iran for that. When the gas works in Iran were bombed by the Israelis, everyone said that was a crime. It was a war crime by the Israelis. Do you remember? Because you're attacking someone's natural resources. Well, when Iranians attack Qatar's natural resources or block the Straits of Hormuz,
it's
no one
defense.
Says
It's a defensive action.
It's defensive action. It's completely unacceptable. And I think Trump's done a great job degrading the Iranian Air Force, destroying the Iranian Air Force, destroying their Navy, degrading their military capability, their capability to produce missiles, no doubt degrading their ability to produce a nuclear bomb. And he has taken them to the negotiating table in a way where they are weak. And I think his blockade also of Hormuz has been brilliant in response to their blockade. 90% of Iran's foreign currency and trade comes through the Strait of Hormuz. So take them down. Absolutely. And we should stand behind it. This is a just action. Just before I finish, Starmer went out to the Middle East recently. I think you would have seen this. And he met various heads of state of Qatar, UAE, and so on. And he was trying to convince them to negotiate with Iran. And they were looking at him thinking, buddy, we're not weak like you. We don't negotiate with people who attack us. We attack them back. You know, what we've forgotten, just moving on to foreign affairs, this has all been foreign affairs, but the way we frame foreign affairs is we take everything with the rule of law. Let me tell you, Iran is not taking stuff through the rule of law. Putin doesn't look through the rule of law. They understand the rule of power. And we've forgotten to project power. We don't know how to project power anymore. HMS Dragon, which was eventually sent to protect Cyprus, took 2 weeks to get out to Cyprus and then immediately broke down. Rule Britannia. What happened to Rule Britannia? We are so hollowed out. And Iran was an opportunity for Starmer actually to make a mark from a foreign policy perspective. He's got it wrong. Every single leader of a British political party, with my exception, has got their position on Iran wrong. We needed to be squarely behind the United States on this action.
I agree. And obviously President Trump is exposing this. Every time he gets to the mic, he's saying that NATO weren't there for us. Yeah. So why should I be there for them? And they're
absolutely
so blind to this, Ben, that when they come with the begging bowl for Ukraine, then he's going to say no. And I've got the narrative now. I've got every example over the Iran situation. Not to give you any money, even though he's making money because the companies are actually selling the kit. to NATO for the money that they've loaned, because their own economies are broken. Our economy is the worst performing and the lowest, got the lowest chance of recovering in the G7, but it probably goes to wider than that, probably goes to the whole of Europe. Well, I think we're behind the Bulgarians now in our economic future. But as you correctly said, Trump has exposed the weakness that these people have. We don't, without an army, as you said, it doesn't really matter the size of your legal team. It's the size of your military. Can you be taken seriously? Trump said, I've got the biggest army in the world. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah. And you know, when he put out that tweet where he said, what did he say? I'll bomb you back to, I'll destroy your
bomb you
out of existence.
Civilization, yes.
He was speaking their language.
Yeah.
And we go, oh my goodness, the language is unacceptable. He's speaking their language. It's language they understand. It's language they would use against us.
Sure. But they don't play by the rules. They have no interest in international laws. This is a dirty street fight where there are no Marquis of Queensberry rules. And the public might not like that, but I think they're getting the realization when our own country is going to the wall, when you see lawlessness in Britain, two-tier justice being served out. You live in London. On a daily basis, you'll hear of friends, colleagues, and associates, members of Advance UK, being attacked, being mugged, children being raped and abused. And these people now are being exposed for what they actually are. They are contemptuous of the British public. And you've been saying this for a long time. They're anti-British.
They're anti-British. Yeah, they're actually positively anti-British. It's deeply distressing.
So, in a positive note, you've come out and said something very encouraging to me, because I'm an advocate of President Trump massively for what he's done already on securing his borders, for scrapping net zero, for taking a coach and horses through a lot of the state, the size of the state that he has, and the waste and the spend. Elon Musk did a fantastic job. Your old friend, Elon Musk, started to do a fantastic job with Doge. So I like the fact that you're aligning yourself with very similar Trumpian policies, not in every way. And I'm pretty disgusted to see the so-called right wing or patriotic parties, or parties that believe in sovereignty, it's like going towards the left on this.
I know. I just, if you ever find yourself basically saying the same thing or supporting a policy position supported by Starmer, you're in the wrong. You've made the wrong decision. And every single leader of a political party in the United Kingdom has backed Starmer's position. It's extraordinary, with my exception. It's extraordinary to me. And they've all said, the oil price. Well, if we were extracting our own gas and extracting our own oil, we'd actually be richer as a country. Our balance of payments would be bettered. We would be a bit like Trump saying, well, it's not our problem, the Strait of Hormuz. But as it is, we've hollowed out our energy capability. We don't use our own fossil fuels. We've got 187 billion tons of coal under our feet. And we've willfully switched its extraction and its use down. So we can't even make steel in this country because it needs coal. It needs the highest quality of coal to make steel. And how are we going to fight a war if we can't have steel? Because you can't make tanks, you can't make ships. All these people, they should be locked up. They should be thrown out of office and locked up.
And it's great people like Senator Kennedy over in America that exposes the fact that the increase in spending will actually only be 1.6%, and it will not happen until 2030. It's been backloaded. Time that you pay all the panjandrums and you pay all the quangos and you pay the civil servants, when it actually gets down to military, boots on the ground and kit, it'll only be 1.6%.
Yeah,
this is a fantastic.
Shocking.
Kennedy gets a platform in America because they have a closer resemblance to free speech. Now, you wouldn't get on GB News, for example, to say this, to say, I'd like you to concentrate, if you could for a second, Miss Dewberry, on this point made by the fantastic Senator Kennedy on what are spent, be across from Barry Gardner. How come Barry Gardner gets on GB News, but Ben Habib doesn't? What's going on?
Well, I don't know why GB News don't have me on. I don't know why. I'm in touch with a number of the presenters who say, you used to pull in really good viewing numbers. So it's not viewing numbers that's the issue. It's something else,
Oh, I think we can guess what that is. But you do appear on Talk TV. We do see you on Kevin O'Sullivan. Kevin and you seem to have a nice relationship, and we need to see you. Yeah. And you can always come on platforms like ours, Ben. You're always a valuable contributor to life in this country and change.
Well, thank you, Marcus.
Well, you've got the track record, and you are someone who's led an organization. You've led a company. You've got the bit between your teeth, and we salute you for that. We'll give you the final word, sir. Is there anything you'd like to just say in conclusion to Keir Starmer and what you think the outcome will be moving forward? Will he have to resign? Will he get through to the May elections?
I think from a purely, right should be done perspective, I'd like to see him resign. But fundamentally, it won't make a blind bit of difference whether he continues as Prime Minister or not.
Yeah. All that remains for me to say is, Mr. Ben Habib, leader of Advance UK, thank you very much for coming back on to Herd Immunity.
Thank you for having me on. Thank you, Marcus.